fraternity prank. Also, the Pope decided today to release Vatican-related bath products. An incredible thing. Yes, it's a new Pope on a rope. That's right, Pope on a rope. Wash with it, go straight to heaven. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Bill Roach, and this is another episode of Timeless Dialogues. And today, what we're going to look at is this breaking news that the North American Grappling Association, which is a jiu-jitsu association, they also include wrestlers, are now allowing transgender athletes to compete in their various tournaments. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. Why does this matter? Why do we need to even talk about this? Well, the reality is that we're seeing this entire progressive movement work its tentacles into every single sphere of our lives. It's being represented in school boards. It's being represented in our politics. It's being represented in our university education, in our legal sphere. And now it's coming to roost in the sports arena. So what I want us to realize is this, is that there comes a time for us to speak out on these matters and to inform people about these different matters. So what I want to do is I want to start out with this famous little sort of poem story that we've listened to years and years again. And I want you to really consider why this is important and why we're dealing with this at this particular time. And it starts out by saying this. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me. So this is what I want you to consider. First, they came for the universities, and you did not speak out because you were not a university professor. Then they came for the legal sphere, but you did not speak out because maybe you're not a lawyer or a judge, even though you can be affected by the way that the law and education works. And then they came for fill in the blank, and you did not speak out. But here's what I want you to see, is that we need to be speaking out about this. I'm a person who is speaking out as an independent individual who deals with this at the graduate level, and I have spoken at conferences on this all over the country for the sheer fact that this whole movement, if it gains ground, will utterly undermine your personal choices and your personal liberties. And I don't want us to just slough this off, because we could rewrite this and say something like this. Well, you know, first they came for this sport, but it didn't affect me because I don't work in the realm of swimming, or I don't work in the realm of education. But here's the reality of it. You have daughters, or you have nieces, or you have a wife, or you have a family member who is a woman. She is not a male, and a male is not a woman. And when you have males competing in female sports, you wonder why they win. It's because they're men. This is not a movement that is just to be all affirming and inclusive. Rather, it's a movement that denies the reality of the world that we live in. And I want to play this little humorous section here because a figure, Khabib, was asked about this, and I think it helps illustrate just the absurdity of the situation that we find ourselves in.
In America, we have a few hundred genders. How many genders do you guys have in Russia? So
notice they're asking, how many genders are there? And Khabib's like, oh my goodness, what am I about ready to step into? Listen to kind of what he says here.
I know you're a math guy, so I'm asking. I think maybe there's a...
You notice he recognizes in Russia, in Dagestan, they don't have this issue.
Here is like, I see only women and men. There is...
And the reason that he sees that there's only two is because there actually only are two.
Got it.
So what I want us to see here is I want to switch to another scene here so that we can continue talking about what's going on. We have to ask ourselves these questions. Why do other countries of the world not have this? Is it because they're not as enlightened as us, or are they not as ideologically driven with this? And what we have to see is that the whole diversity movement is really training you in critical consciousness. The inclusive movement is a whole mode of which people are only allowing those to be included who buy into critical theory and critical consciousness. And the equity movement is nothing more than social Marxism. So what's being done here is not just a ploy of allowing, you know, those who are trying to affirm themselves as a different gender into the sports arena. It has virtually nothing to do with this. In fact, I agree with the whole idea is it actually should be deemed grooming. Yes, they are groomers. And the reason that they are groomers is they are trying to tell you how to think, how to feel, how to affirm, all according to not reality, but according to critical consciousness. So what spewed my attention on this was Riley Gaines, the noted swimmer, said this. You know who Riley Gaines is? She's the person who is speaking out against all of the transgender athletes ruining female sports. And she goes on and she says this: in a martial arts tournament last week, several females boycotted because of the surplus of men competing against the women. And I would say good for them. And the reason is they realize that unless they speak out, nothing is going to change. In addition to it, if they compete, there's a real chance that they're going to get hurt, and hurt significantly. Bad, very bad, in the sense that we've seen this. What happens is like, you know, when a male competes against a female in running, they win by 50 yards. When they do it in swimming, they win by whatever distance that may be. But when you're dealing with a grappling sport, the woman gets beat up. How is that not abuse? Because it is abuse. We realize exactly what it is. And she goes on to say this: in most of the women's divisions, there were more males than females competing. In one of the women's division, there were only males left competing, as seen in the podium picture below. And you wonder why? It's because when you take a man and you have him compete against a woman, he's bigger and stronger, and they'll be like, oh, but the weight classes are the same. Doesn't matter. A biological man is stronger, even at the same weight, than 99% of biological women. And why do we even have to add biological before it? We realize men are men and women are women. We're playing linguistic games with people. We're playing these pseudoscience reality issues when we're looking at these different grappling sports in this way. Now, what I want to do is I want to transition to where we see the full breakdown of this story here. And the breakdown of it comes from this. And this comes from what's known as Redux. And they are really a group that is working to purge the female sports arena from transgender, namely male athletes, from competing. And the headline says, exclusive: women abandon Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament after being forced to fight males. And they show pictures here. I mean, these are clearly men standing on the podium. Clearly, this is a man taking home 3 different medals and the NAGA belt, the infamous sought-after NAGA belt. But let's read what the article says here. It says, female martial artists have come forward to reveal that male athletes claiming to be transgender have completely overtaken the women's categories of a major grappling association. In fact, it's not just a major, it's probably one of the top 3 that are out there. There are people that travel from all over the world to compete in NAGA tournaments. It goes on to say, leaving them fearful for their safety in many instances. And like we said, they should be fearful of their safety because they're competing against somebody that's a man, that's stronger than them. It goes on to say, one of the men, Carissa Griffith, which I don't even want to say this. We're going to call Carissa Steve for all I'm concerned, took home 4 gold medals in the women's category during a tournament in Georgia on October 21st. Notice why I say this. Here's what I want you to realize. We live in a culture where it is PC dominated. What you can only say is what is politically correct. But what that is it's the pure censoring of free speech. I'm not going to be forced to use pronouns and affirm things in a way that reality doesn't dictate, the law has never used, society has never bought into, just because within the last 7 or 8 years, people have tried to bring this to the forefront of society. In fact, what I would recommend you do is go read this wonderful book titled The Weaponization of Loneliness: How Tyrants Stoke Our Fear of Isolation to Silence, Divide, and Conquer by Stella Morabito. Because what she talks about in here is that they are using this so that you're fearful to speak out about it. They want you to self-censor instead of just kicking you out of the organization. And what I want us to see here is that unless we speak up now, this will wreck every sport that we have. And it goes on to say this: NAGA is the largest submission grappling association in the world and facilitates standards and tournaments in various martial arts, including Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But while NAGA has provided competition categories for males and females since its inception in 1995, it has recently become the subject of controversy after a number of female athletes were found to have been matched up against trans-identified males. It goes on to say this. The first received widespread attention in September after it was learned that a female Brazilian jiu-jitsu athlete had not been informed she would be competing against a male. So notice this. They're not even informing people of what's going on. They're really just making a behind-the-scenes change. They're pushing this policy in, and they're not even informing the athletes that are participating. It goes on to say this. Taylor Moore posted a clip of her fight against James Alice McPike on her Instagram, noting that there was a 65-pound weight difference between them. I would expect that. And here's one of the things. You can see the picture here. James McPike took home silver in the women's category. Now, I don't know what's more interesting, funny, laughable in this sense, whether or not they're not informing them, or the fact that this man went in and got beat by a bunch of women. Like, literally, my response to that is,
man, you are one pathetic loser.
And why is he a pathetic loser? The main reason that he's a pathetic loser is for the sheer fact that, one, he doesn't have the fortitude to go and compete in the men's division. Second of all, he lost. It's funny because a lot of these people in all of these sports, when they do this, they're really just the subpar male athletes that can't compete in that arena. So they think that they can jump into this arena and dominate. Somehow it's equal. When the reality is that they're fooling themselves. They are working. We know this. We know this. They're total frauds in what they're doing. Women's athletes are great athletes, but they can't compete against men because it's just biologically different. We realize this. We've all heard this. We know this. We've realized this since we were children here. So let's keep looking at this here real quick. Oh, crud, it switched off on me. Goes on to say this. Following the clip going viral, NAGA was prompted, namely forced, to issue a statement clarifying its policies on the inclusion of trans-identified males in women's category. Notice, inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion. That's the buzzword. You need to always be looking for these particular linguistic manipulations. Inclusion doesn't just mean, oh, we want men competing however they identify. Rather, we want people steeped, indoctrinated, completely gaslit into critical theory, namely this isn't just critical race theory. This is critical gender theory, or it could be all the LGBTQ plus. What's the plus, you must ask? Goes on to say this, that NAGA, quote, does not require biological women to compete against transgender women, except that they already did. Instead, we give the choice to biological women, and if they decline, they compete in division only with other biological women, except they did not do that. They did not give this person who was up here, this woman, Taylor Moore, the opportunity to have that choice. Rather, I know exactly what happened. She lined up, she went out there, she got ready to slap fists, slap hands and bump fists, and she was forced to compete against a biological male against her knowledge. That's exactly what the issue was here. So now they're telling you, oh, we're sorry, we messed up, we're going to fix it. I'm not convinced that they will. In fact, we're going to look at it here. It goes on to say this. NAGA also provided a link to their official policy, which reads, for those who choose not to compete with the transgender female, we will inquire if they have an interest in entering a separate division which includes a transgender female. This additional division will be offered at no cost to those competitors. However, if individuals decline this opportunity, the transgender female will be directed to compete with the males in their respective weight and skill level category. So let me tell you exactly how this is going to play out. I know exactly how this is going to play out. They're going to find some tournament at some place related to this organization, and they're going to, in many respects, wait for this transgender female to not have anybody. And when this transgender female is asked to go and compete with the male, they're going to say, NAGA does not represent my rights. They're going to say, NAGA is not diverse, inclusive. They're not giving me the equitable opportunity that I deserve. And the reality is you can never appease this mob unless you give them exactly what they want. Not a third division, not their own little place with it. Rather, what they're doing is in this situation is that if you give them this third place, you're still not going to win for the sheer fact that you're not affirming that they think that they're really women. So what you need to do is realize this. As the old book says, give a mouse a cookie and he's going to want more and more and more and more and more. Give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want milk, and then he's going to want a napkin, or whatever the book says in that sense. If you try to appease these people and you don't let them exclusively participate with biological women, because that's what they think they are going to bring legal cases against you. They will complain endlessly about it. So your third way is not going to work, and allowing them to compete with biological men is not going to work. What you need to do is say, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I see. I know this manipulation. It does not work on me. By James Lindsay. James Lindsay came up with that. So think about this. We know what we're talking about. We know what we see. What we're seeing is men trying to affirm themselves in what I think is really just a psychological malady. These people don't have a affirmation issue. They have a psychological issue. And I will just say this, as a Christian, it's not just a psychological issue. It's a suppression of the truth of God in their unrighteousness, because they are denying the truth about their creator and how they were created. So instead of affirming this, what you're seeing here. You need to reject it. It's a form of manipulation to take over your organization. This will utterly destroy NAGA. And it's not just going to be NAGA. It's going to be every Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu organization in the entire world. You need to clip it and stop it now, lest it takes over, lest they then start demanding leadership roles and all of these different things and changing the rules according to what they want. It will not stop here. How do I know?
In America,
let's just think about this. We'll come back to that here in just a second.
Gen-
Think of Evergreen State College. They wanted to be the most inclusive, diverse university that was out there. And what happened is they brought in literally hundreds of thousands of students, trained them in critical theory, critical consciousness, this stuff that's going on. And when somebody merely asked the question, well, where do I see these discrepancies taking place? They literally mobbed the school, ran the professor out, and it virtually shut down the institution. Like, I still think it's a functioning institution, but they weren't able to operate in the same way ever again. And this is precisely what's going to happen with grappling sports or any sport if we allow this to happen. They don't just want to be involved in women's sports. They want not only special rights, they want exclusive rights, rights that deny reality. So let's keep going here and let's keep looking at this article. So it goes on to say, but despite claiming to have had a policy in place that required female athletes to be informed, many are coming forward to reveal that NAGA has continued to pair women against trans-identified males without their knowledge and depriving them of the opportunity to opt out in many instances. Why? Because they know the real social consequences of if they do that. It goes on to say, speaking to Redux, professional martial artists Jaden Alexander and Ansley Wilk said that they were made to fight against a male with no prior warning from NAGA until stepping onto the mat. Quote, I honestly never thought this would happen in a contact sport, especially not my contact sport. Let's stop here for 1 second. Where did we talk about this before? I didn't think it would happen in contact sport, especially not my contact sport. First, they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Or first, I did not, they came for the swimmers, but I did not speak out because I was not a swimmer. Then they came for the basketball arena, but I did not speak out because I was not a basketball player. Then they came for fill in the blank, as this, the classic one would say, the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there was no one left to speak for me. Well, I'm speaking for you. So let's keep going here. Let's keep playing this. It goes on to say this. Both Alexander and Wilk fought against Cordilla Gregory of Temporal Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Steve, let's just call it that. I don't even want to mess with the names. He's one of the many trans-identified males currently participating in NAGA women's tournaments. Both women described that they were not informed they would be competing against a male until it was too late during their July tournaments. Quote, I hadn't been notified. The only thing that brought it to my attention was my teammates. They kept asking me, are you fighting a man? And I was honestly too focused on coaching the rest of the crew to really pay attention to my opponent, Wilk said. Quote, I realized quickly I couldn't muscle them like most girls. Why? Because they're not girls. They're men. Wilk, who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. Now, just think about this. A brown belt is a high elite competitor at this point. This is somebody that's been doing jiu-jitsu for probably 7 or 8 years, maybe even longer. It just depends. Depends on how long your coach keeps you there. So this is not like a brand new competitor. This is a person that's a seasoned grappler. And yeah, we understand in jiu-jitsu, you know, we're supposed to be able to fight the bigger, stronger individual, but size matters. If they're bigger and stronger than you, it's going to affect the way that this operates. And goes on to say, well, obviously, because it wasn't a girl, then not long after, I had to do a second match with Cordella, Steve, threw a tantrum saying he didn't tap out. I was sincerely scared he was going to punch me when I stuck my hand out to shake. Seriously? I understand in grappling sports that people sometimes fake the tap. But what this is this is a person who's throwing a tantrum. And this is precisely what the woke do. The woke will throw a fit whenever they don't get what they want. So, okay, this woman is fearful that she's going to be attacked in this situation. NAGA, what are you going to do about it? Probably nothing. In addition to it, what are you going to do when they throw the exact same fits in different arenas within your organization or within other Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu organizations? It's going to happen. Look at it. This is what society has done. This is how the you didn't affirm me, I'm the oppressed, therefore I'm going to speak out, and you must blanket statement believe everything that I'm saying to you operates. This is how critical theory works in theory, function, and practice. I mean, look at this. Look at this woman versus this man. Look at the difference in size there. There is a significant difference between the two. Go on to look at this. It says both women also noted that the experience of fighting Gregory was distinctly different than fighting a woman. Quote, the fact of the matter is that he had a man's strength. I train with men and women, and the difference is massive, Alexander explained. Quote, after my match with Cordella, Steve, I sat Matt's side and cried as my teammates massaged out my cramping forearms. But despite NAGA's claims that its policy was to inform female athletes if their competitor was a biological man, watchdogs have noted that no enforcement of the policy appears to be taking place, even since their September announcement. I'm not surprised by this. And the reason is that if you actually inform somebody about this, you're not affirming their gender, and then they'll probably sue you, and they're more afraid of being sued than actually saving women's sports and protecting women in these particular instances. Goes on to say this, quote, a rule is only effective if a federation will follow it and, most importantly, enforce it, says Marcy Smith, the co-founder of Independent Council of Women's Sports. She noted that on October 21st, a female grappler was blindsided into fighting not one, but 2 trans-identified males during a tournament. Here's what you got to see. This rule, this policy is not really a policy. It's merely a way so that they can point people, say, we're trying to deal with this situation. They're not going to do anything with it. Nothing. This is gaslighting. It's smoke and mirrors. They're not going to do anything about it. And that's why I affirm the fact that these women start boycotting these. In fact, you should start having whole teams boycott groups like NAGA or whichever one until they stop this garbage. I mean, literally, you have to pull the strings of the purse so that people aren't attending their tournaments. And believe me, when they are fearful of going out of business, they'll probably start to consider whether or not they want to change their policy or enforce their policy. And again, this policy is garbage. We're not going to play these games. We're not going to fall for these manipulations. There's no such thing as transgender. These are men who have a psychological issue thinking that they're women, or women who have a psychological issue thinking that they're men. Let's not even play the game anymore. Reality doesn't require you to fall for these pseudoscience, pseudo-reality issues that are going on. Let's continue looking here. Danielle Lian, one of the only females involved in the competition, was made to fight Steve or Cordella or Carissa Griffith, whatever their names are. They always come up with different names. The later representing Odyssey Jiu-Jitsu. Following the fight, Leanne asked for her record to be wiped clean of any indication she had fought either one of the men. Good for her. That's exactly what she should have done, because she wasn't actually competing on an equal level playing field. Smith said that during the October 21st tournament, there were more males participating than women in some of the women's divisions. I'm not surprised by that. Once the proverbial camel's nose is under the tent, everything is going to come in. In the women's no-gi fight for the 160 to 169 pound weight classes, only Griffith and Gregory participated and took home medals. Well, good for them. Probably would have got no medal if you actually compete in the male division. On his Instagram, Griffith joked about the match, posting a scene from Japanese softcore pornography series and suggesting the two women depicted represented him and Gregory. Huh. Yep. It's because transgender is not just, oh, we're here to represent transgender. It's the full-blown LGBTQ plus critical gender theory movement. We have to see it for what it is. And what it is, well, okay, groomer, quote James Lindsay again. Jaden Alexander says that she and other females were set to compete in the October 21st tournament, but dropped out after seeing how many males were involved. Good for them. There was not just one, but two trans-identified males who were signed up in a bracket that me and several other women should have been able to sign up for, but couldn't because we didn't want to go against the men. Alexander explains, quote, and for a man to be able to come in and sign up in the tournament bracket and discourage us from even being able to compete at all is absolutely heartbreaking and honestly scary. Of course it is. You should be scared. And the reason is as they've said, they're bigger, they're stronger, they can hurt you. And when you win, you're fearful that they're going to punch you in the face. In addition to it, Ansley Wilk affirmed Alexander's sentiment and added that most female participants feel unable to vocally protest the gender self-identification policies. Why? Because it's under the heading of PC culture. Why? They're using the weaponization of loneliness. Why? They're self-censoring you. They know if you speak out against this, or if they say something about this, the woke mob will come down upon them. But don't let fear keep you from fulfilling your First Amendment rights related to free speech. You have the right to speak out on these things. You have the right to not be censored in this regard. And if we keep shutting our mouths, we will have nowhere else to go. Keep fighting for these situations. Goes on to say this. The majority of women feel scared to even speak out about this matter. They don't want to be labeled as a bigot or transphobic. Namely, just like this, racist, sexist, bigoted, homophobe, racist, sexist, bigoted, homophobe. They're nothing more than slur words to control you. They're manipulations in order to shut you up. This is nothing more than what we saw in the propaganda of Marx and Lenin and Soviet Russia, or in Germany, or Mao and his totalitarian governments as it relates to, are you in the proper, are you of the red guard or the black guard? Or now what we're finding is the Marxist revolution that's taking place in the United States of America, according to our two things, race and now all this gender, whatever stuff that's going on with it. Don't fall for it. Keep speaking out. Let reality win. Don't let them silence your voice. It goes on to say, there are so many girls just not signing up now because they're allowing this. Women's sports will cease to exist if this keeps up. Medals, belts, records, and money are going to be stripped right away from women. That's the real consequence. Notice this. You know, they talk about these things as being like analytical tools to understand the psychological effects of people. Well, tools come in two ways. Tools can be constructive or they can be for destruction. You know, my screwdriver and my electric screwdriver can build things, and that's a tool. But I can also come out with a sledgehammer. That's another tool, and bring a massive wrecking ball to this situation. And that's specifically what this is going to do to women's sports, not just jiu-jitsu, all sports in general. Marcy Smith similarly notes that women have been self-excluding. Self-censoring is what it is. It's a form of self-censoring based off of false narrative propaganda from the competitions. But that attempts to formally lodge complaints about being paired up against males have fallen on deaf ears. I thought you had a policy, but they're not listening to you. The policy is nothing. It's gaslighting the women in order to keep the brackets alive. It goes on to say this, quote, I have now spoken to 4 women who have all fought male fighters in the combat sport of jiu-jitsu. They are extremely upset. They are self-excluding. They are emailing Federation leadership and being dismissed. What about believe all women? What about listen to women? Oh, it only works in certain cases. Here, it doesn't fit ideology. And because it doesn't fit critical theory ideology, well, they're not the right kind of women that we want to listen to. That sounds like discrimination to me. In addition, these organizations and teams that are encouraging this dangerous display of violence against women need to be publicly shamed into doing what is right for women or reap the outrage that comes with cowardice. And that is precisely what it is. These
in America,
figures that are
we
doing
have
this
a few hundred genders. How many genders do you guys have in Russia?
Let's let Sabine talk about it. And we laugh. They're absolute cowards. They're buying into a critical theory. They're allowing women to be beat up, bullied, overpowered, lose their voice, and so much more. We need to speak out now. We need to realize that this ideology is destructive to not only society, but women are actually getting hurt and will continue to get hurt for it. So what should you do? You need to start boycotting tournaments that do this. Not just your female athletes. Teams need to boycott organizations that do these types of things. In addition to it, you need to sit down with your athletes and let them know as a coach, you stand behind your students. And if this stuff happens, you're not going to force them to compete against somebody with this. You're not going to force your female fighters to go in order to live up to this cultural moment of the day. Again, we know what we're talking about. We know what we see. We know these manipulations. They're not going to work on me or my gym or my athletes or anybody else that's having to compete in this arena. What we have to see is that we should also not stop speaking out about this. Use your voice. You live in a country that allows you to speak out about these matters. Write the federations, write the different organizations. Use your ability, instead of maybe competing in the tournament, show up outside the tournament and protest it. Mark my words, if you have whole jiu-jitsu teams showing up, protesting these things that are going on, they won't keep it up for very long, because once the news organizations get into it, they're going to have to deal with it. Now, they may do this. This is one of my speculations. They may double down for a while, but the reality is that when the money gets played into it, namely, they're going to keep losing money, this is what they're going to do. They're going to most likely start at least considering their policies. Now, what I would actually call for is not some transgender policy. My transgender policy would be this. We have 2 divisions, male and female, period. We're not even going to play around with this ideology. So we could keep going on and on and on, but we see what's going on here. We recognize what's going on here. So to conclude with how we started, then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. Well, we live in a world in which you can speak for yourself and your coaches can speak for you and parents can speak for you and people like myself can speak for you. Keep speaking out on this. Save your sports. Don't fall for this vain ideology. Thank you.
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck.